Welcome to the Time to Hire podcast.
I'm Jake Paul.
And I'm Will Ducey. Our goal with this podcast is to bring in new perspectives and ensure the recruiting function remains relevant and forward-looking.
We talk to recruiting experts, HR tech founders, and anyone who brings unconventional ideas to help push the craft of recruiting forward.
If you want to future-proof yourself and increase your impact over time through strategy, technology, and best practices, this is the podcast for you. It is time to hire. Kevin, welcome to the Time to Hire podcast.
It's great to be here.
Let's jump right in. I'm going to show this book to the screen quickly. Your new book, Talent Acquisition Excellence. Why did you write this book now?
Well, I'll tell you, we had a lot of time during the pandemic. That's really what's kicked it off. And it's been something I've been thinking about for a long time. There's just so much going on in the talent space right now, and clearly around analytics, AI, and the whole digital transformation of recruiting. So that was really what spurred the book was, I think, first of all, talent acquisition is far from excellent today. And I think AI and technology may help it to become a little bit better than it is. And that was sort of what we wanted to talk about in the book.
The other thing that stands out to me about your experience, Kevin, you're constantly putting out your newsletter, The Future of Talent newsletter weekly. I think I just saw a poll that went out. I did vote for that. Can you share a couple of standout insights from your newsletter that is really resonating with your readers right now? What topics are getting the most engagement?
I think the most engagement comes from when I talk about the automation or the potential automation of a big chunk of recruiting. I mean, that's really what either scares people or excites them, one or the other, a combination of both usually. But I mean, I think that's really what's going on. That's really the challenge that recruiters face is how do we use this technology effectively, and what does that mean for our jobs and our future?
And is there anything that stands out to you in your newsletters that should be getting more engagement that's just not right now?
Yeah, I think my latest poll, it's about the whole idea of internal mobility and employee development, and what role does recruiting play in that, and should it play a role in that? And I think it's the make-buy argument that's been around forever. I mean, for the last decade, we've just been buying talent and very little effort into make any talent or train it or develop it. And I think the whole focus on internal mobility right now is really basically a code word for saying, let's develop our own people that we have. And that's really the thing that most recruiters are, a little distant from or not really much aware of and don't know much about. So that's kind of, I think that's the area that's the least, resonates the least.
Okay, and you infer a little bit in your book in the new model of TA that could and maybe should be owned by TA, that internal people development, talent development. Do you see that as a natural extension of what recruiters should do, or do you see that more in the HR side of the house?
No, I definitely see it as what recruiters should be doing. I mean, I think it's really hard. It will become increasingly difficult to separate recruiting from development. They kind of go hand in hand. It's a make-buy thing. Do we make it or do we buy it? And if you have some sort of a strategic talent look ahead of your company, what do you want to do? What kind of people do you want to have? Then you really need to focus on, if these skills are so scarce and they're so critical to our success, we should probably be developing people to have these skills, right? And if the skills are pretty, very obviously available in the marketplace, then let's buy them. But if they're really important to us, if they're strategically part of what we have to do to survive, we definitely should be having some focus on developing this kind of talent. To me, they go hand in hand. I mean, I don't know how, you can consistently sit there as a recruiter and keep getting recs that you can't find people to fill and not say, gee, we've got good people inside the company. Couldn't we train some of these people to do this? I think that's really it's not really a mystery. I get where they're coming from. It's hiring managers. They want people that can hit the road running. But if you look at the history of corporations, the best ones, the IBMs, the Deloittes of the world, they've invested always millions of dollars in employee development, and it's paid off because they have never had any issues with talent.
Do you think the blocker of that getting real sort of traction with organizations has just been technology? Because I know that a lot of sourcing tools now are surfacing your internal ATS database. That has not been a historical thing that is easy to access, and that a place that recruiters and sourcers tend to go to first. But in addition to that, what's happening is, a database of your existing employee base with some of these tools as well. So do you think there's a technology component that is going to help facilitate that, or broadly, why haven't we seen this happen more often?
Oh, I think it will facilitate it, but I think it's more of an excuse than reality. It's convenient to say, "Oh, we just didn't know," or "We couldn't find them." There's no reason. Every hiring manager, everybody identifies people that have potential, that have talent. Many people self-identify. I would love to learn how to do X or Y if there was an opportunity to learn how to do that. So to me, it's about raising the issue within the company. It's not necessarily recruiting's fault. It's really a fault of the leadership of the company and HR that hasn't been encouraging this and building this. But if I look back to when I began my career, which was in the centuries ago, literally, the companies invested a lot of money in training and development. I started my career in training and development. I was leading a training and development function. So, IBM is a great example. Deloitte, General Electric, a lot of these companies, they didn't hire mid-level people. They only hired entry-level people and trained them to the jobs within the company. And that's hard for us to realize today. But IBM probably hired out of 1,000 people, 10 that had experience or were mid-career or higher career, and usually only at the senior level. They developed everybody else. So those companies have been the most profitable, have endured the longest, have had great productivity and great loyalty because they invested in people. So I think it's really started in the 80s, if you want to get into the history of this a little bit, when we began really focusing on shareholder value and cutting out, quote unquote, the fat. And the fat, unfortunately, was learning and development and a lot of other things that didn't give a short-term payback, but gave you a long-term payback. So we're paying the price. I mean, this is why we have a talent shortage today. We didn't develop the talent we needed, and then we blame the whole world for it. We blame the database, or we blame the universities, or whatever else. But I really think corporations have nobody to blame but themselves for not investing in this.
Cool. Well, what we're going to do on this episode is focus exclusively, well, not exclusively, but dive into your book, Talent Acquisition Excellence, Using Digital Capabilities and Analytics to Improve Recruitment. Will and I both have it. We both read it. And there's a lot of meat to this bone. And so what we wanted to do, instead of just focusing on a couple chapters, is just kind of plow through each chapter and, go through a few questions on each, and then kind of move forward to really get a comprehensive view of, what someone might be able to expect if they were to buy your book. So starting with chapter 1, the emerging talent ecosystem. In this, you start to talk about the changing landscape of the talent ecosystem. And one of the interesting things to me was how you describe, and I've got a quote here on how you describe it. So basically, today we've got a smaller number of independent workers than traditional ones, but this might reverse over the next decade or two. Employers need to be aware that the talent that they most desire and need will be the first to adopt an independent work style. So what I'm hearing is that there's a divergence happening of the needs that top talent are going to have in the future, and as their appetite and how they desire to work is going to change, and TA organizations, or just organizations in general, need to stay up to date with that. Otherwise, all the top talent, they won't be equipped to actually employ them. So could you talk about that and just go a little bit deeper on what we're talking about here?
Yeah. I mean, let's just take, you're a senior level programmer, let's say. You can get multiple job offers tomorrow. So you can basically choose your lifestyle. And the pandemic sort of gave credibility and access to that alternative lifestyle. So now I can live in Idaho, or I can live wherever I want, and I can practice my craft, in effect. Okay. So why would I come to work for Intel or IBM or anybody else when I can work remotely and be very productive and control my own life? So I think we're going to see we already are seeing an increased focus on that. The digital nomads, the people living in other countries and working remotely. So despite the efforts recently for companies to get people to come back, what they're getting to come back are the mid-level and the lower-level people. The most senior people, the ones that have clout, let's say, that have the really valuable, important skills, still have a choice. and they're either opting to work remotely or to only work occasionally in the office, right? So the trend is away from working in the office. Certainly, there's some recent research that correlates salary with the ability to work remotely, which is really, really fascinating. Basically, until 2 years ago, people that worked remotely were scattered over the salary spectrum. All right, some people could work from home that were fairly low salary. That's completely flipped. So now the minimum salary basically for working remotely is about $150K a year. And if you are in less than that, you're probably going to be asked or required to come back to work, at least a certain number of days a week. Above that, you have tremendous amount of freedom and flexibility. Pretty interesting research. So the people that are earning big money are generally the people that have big skills, that have the skills that companies really need and want, and therefore they have the option to do what they want to do. So, well, we're saying it with younger people too. The younger people are saying, even if they don't have that kind of salary, they're just saying, I don't want to be an employee. I want to work, as a freelancer, a gig worker, whatever it is, unless I can have some flexibility in when I work, how I work, the hours I work, and so forth. So with a lot of pushback from the top and the bottom, basically the entry level and the very skilled people. The people in the middle are sort of caught in the trap of having to go back to work or having to not being able to work remotely. But you're seeing a lot of youth pushing back big time, younger people, just saying, I'm just not going to go to work. Talk to recruiters about trying to recruit some of the younger people, and they turn down the offers or don't even want to hear it unless they have flexibility. So it's this interesting phenomena. The new work is changing.
And it feels like we're right in the thick of it. So many outcomes yet to be determined, right? It's like, it does feel like there's a lot of large organizations that are very firm in this, return to office policies that they're setting. And or if their most senior workers aren't coming back, is the result going to be, from a compensation standpoint, that on-site or in-person roles objectively pay a significant amount more? Because it's, during the COVID and when all the, remote stuff was starting, that was the whole debate, right? Is are you going to pay for based on where they're at, or are you going to pay them compensatory to where the office is? And so, I'm curious where you think this is all going to settle.
We're in a big compensation revolution or evolution, I guess. It's really hard for most of the traditional comp people to deal with this new world. They have surveys, they've got their salary rankings, and et cetera, and they're worried about internal compression. How can you earn more than me? I've been here longer than you, or whatever, right? So we're in a whole new world where compensation is really going to have to is already going through discussions and transformation. How do you pay people? Do we pay people for their skills? Do we pay people for their output? Do we pay people to come to work every day? We've had a 100-year tradition of paying people for time. You come to work 8 hours a day and you get paid for 8 hours a day of pay. And whether you produce or not is almost irrelevant in many cases, okay? As long as you show up every day, you're going to get a paycheck, okay? If you don't show up, you're not going to get a paycheck, or you're going to get paid. So that's transformed, that's changing. Now we're saying, these people that are working in Northern Idaho, for example, are saying, I produce code, I write so much code or whatever it is for you, I create your marketing, whatever it is. Why do you care how much time it took me and whether I worked 40 hours this week or not? So how are you going to pay these kind of people, right? So this is the real quandary that compensation is in. I'm not a compensation expert. I don't have an answer for how you do it, but I know we're going to have to figure it out. Okay, this is probably one of the biggest challenges of the next 5 years. Is how do you pay people when you're not paying them for their time? And so if you do skills, how do you assess skills? Are you going to do volume of programming? Well, that's not a very good measure because it may be really bad quality. So how do you judge quality? So we're going to have to reinvent compensation. And I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
It's a big issue.
Awesome. Well, lots of paths to go down that, but for the sake of time, I want to move on to chapter 2 here. Which let me just pull up my notes here. And so chapter 2, technology, talent acquisition. You go pretty deep on the future state of recruiting process automation. Will and I have had a few guests where we've talked about AI in the future state and like how much of the recruiter's role is going to be truly automated. You've got some people saying that recruiters will be all but, replaced by AI. Then you've got other folks saying that's nothing but a enhancement to make recruiters just simply better at their roles or at their jobs. And so what's your take on that? Where does that land? And yeah, as far as all the things that you can automate throughout the interview process and the just general role of a recruiter, what level of that do you get automated?
Yeah. I mean, let's just face the reality. The technology is getting better and better every day. We know that the technology can help us find people, can engage them and do initial screening of people. It can actually do pretty much the interview for people. It can produce a short list of highly screened and competent candidates for most recruiters. So I think the bottom line is the technology is here today. It's getting better in an exponential way, not a linear way. And I think that's what people misunderstand about this, that it's not going to take a year to get better. It's going to take a week to get better. Okay. It's happening really quickly. So when you get the objections that recruiters have to, it's not as good as me. Yeah, they're probably true. But the old rule of technology, if it's 80% as good as you are, I'm going to use the technology. Right? That other 20% is nice to have, but it's not critical. Okay. So I've got a technology that can find, 80% of the people I need, or can find people with 80% of the skills I need. That's probably good enough. If I can screen them, they're 80% okay for this job. It's probably as good or better than a recruiter could do, even though they might take longer and maybe get to 90%. So the bottom line is technology is going to augment or replace a lot of the things that recruiters currently do. Okay, that's the bottom line. Now, replace it totally? Maybe not. Maybe just augment or assist, but even that's huge, right? So if a recruiter right now can handle 20 requisitions, and now he can handle 40 requisitions, that means I can replace that recruiter. I can replace one recruiter, right? And maybe you can handle 50 or 60 requisitions, because the amount of time you have to actually invest personally in each candidate is much less, because the technology is doing a whole lot of the stuff that you used to do. So I think the bottom line is the volume of recruiters, the number of people who are recruiters, is going to shrink significantly. Look what we've just seen in the last year. How many thousands of recruiters have been laid off, right? And usually the public, HR, or whoever's done it, has come out and said, and we're not likely to hire them back. Okay. IBM was very clear. They said, we're going to lay off a lot of back office people, including recruiters, and we're not going to replace them. So technology is already going to do that. Now, does that mean all recruiters are gone? No, we're still going to have recruiters. The recruiters are going to be probably a much more strategic, a higher level. They're not going to be as administrative and clerical as many recruiters have been. They're going to have a whole new set of skills. And, some of those skills are going to be marketing skills. Some are going to be influence and communication skills. Some are just going to be building relationships and doing talent intelligence and developing strategy. So these are things that the average recruiter never really got involved in. They may spend most of their life looking to find somebody to fit a slot, and then interviewing and screening them and sending them on to a hiring manager. That almost clerical kind of a role, in my opinion, is really going to disappear. And that's going to be handled by automation.
Yeah. And then it's like, who handle the automation? So Will is in recruiting ops, talent operations, right? And as we, chatted about this whole concept before, it's like, I'm envisioning somebody's role who is to exclusively manage all the systems to ensure that they're, continuously optimizing them, all the automated systems. And I don't know if that's the recruiter's role or if that's a rec ops role, but if I'm, I just have a lot of optimism for those that are in the rec ops space today, because it's going to be so systems driven. And just an additional component to that.
I mean, if I was a head of recruiting right now, the first person I would hire would be a technology guy, somebody who could really evaluate the technology, help me integrate it, implement it, and so forth, right? I think it's a critical role. I think all the really strategic forward-looking recruiting functions will have somebody that can do that role, whether it's a permanent employee you hire or whether it's a consultant or a contractor that you have on retainer. I don't know. There's a bunch of options for that, but you need to have somebody that can help you do that.
Kevin, you have a really nice visual in your book on the 6 stages of the evolution of the recruitment processes. I'd say most organizations might be between stage 2, maybe 3, as we're starting to adapt to some of this technology. And stage 6 is the entirely candidate and hiring manager driven hiring process where recruiters really are serving a very limited role. How soon could we might experience a company at the stage 6 level? And is this achievable?
Absolutely. I think there are a few small companies that are very close to that right now. Very close. I think it really depends to the complexity and size of your organization right now. Depends on the volume of recruiting and the kinds of people that you're recruiting. But if the tools are getting better and better, as I said, every day, and a lot of it is being willing to let go and experiment and just see how it works. It's that 80-20 thing I mentioned a few minutes ago. This technology may not be 100% perfect. It may not do as well a job as a senior recruiter could do, but if it can do it 80% as well, 85% as well, that may be good enough for us right now, right? So the number of companies approaching that level 6 are probably 6 in the whole world, maybe 5 or 6. And they're small and they're mostly in Europe. So it's interesting. I think that a lot of companies are maybe at 3 and 4, struggling to get there. But I would say 80% of all recruiting companies are level 1, 1.5. That's really
you differentiate between sort of corporate hiring versus high volume hourly hiring. Like, because to me, I see a faster path on the high volume side, but I'm curious.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question if you're hiring call center staff or if you're hiring sales associates. I mean, Macy's used to hire, probably changing now with a changing retail world, but they used to hire something like 80,000 people for 6 weeks for Christmas. All right. That can be completely automated. All right. Completely. The call centers that hire, hundreds of people whose primary skill is communications and maybe language, those can be automated right now. A lot of companies are hiring truck driving is automated, large degree of that. So there's a lot of jobs that have a very, very set of skills you need to have to do the job. There's a lot of data on who does that job better than other people. So you've got the real information you need to make decisions. So if you want to have a job like that and you can answer half dozen questions properly, maybe take one skill test of some sort, there's no reason I can't immediately just say you're hired.
Are you thinking already in the state where, like, a truck driver, for example, doesn't even have to speak directly or at least live with another human and they get that offer?
No, not necessarily. And when you ask them if they want to, they go, no, I'd prefer not to, right? I've been doing this job for 20 years or 10 years or whatever. I've got all the proper licenses. My driving record is clean. I've got no tickets. So why can't you hire me to drive a truck? Why do I need to talk to somebody for an hour?
Right.
So I think we have these preconceived notions that everybody wants to talk to somebody, that this is really critical, that, and in some cases it may well be, but why don't you give people an option? And when you give people an option, do you really want to talk to somebody or not? Most people opt out. Do you want to get an SMS message or call somebody to verify your credit card? How many people opt for the calling somebody? Virtually zero. Okay. All right. So when you give people an option, do I want to talk to somebody, or is there some way I can do it that's faster, easier, and automated? Almost always they pick the faster, easy, and automated way to go. So I think recruiters you've got a whole lot of built-in assumptions, that everybody wants to talk to somebody, that touching the flesh is really important, that, having a face-to-face meeting is critical. And I think that's bullshit. I just don't think there's any data to support that. May be true for certain high-level jobs, for certain critical roles in the company, that may be important, but for many roles, it's just absolutely not necessary.
Yeah, well, I think it's less the recruiters, it's more the hiring managers who just have a history of needing to feel like they need to meet them in person. And so as we move into 2024, is your company among the 65% of those who say that measuring quality of hire is the top initiative for your TA team? If so, you should know about CrossCheck. We're a hiring analytics platform that transforms all of your hiring data into insightful, actionable, and easily shareable dashboards, purpose-built for recruiting teams. Not only does CrossCheck take in your core pre-hire data, but it goes one giant step further by ingesting your data from the HR side of the house, like performance and retention. And by combining the two, we're able to help you unlock the holy grail of recruiting, quality of hire. At CrossCheck, we believe recruiting programs and strategies should be driven by actual business outcomes, not just hiring targets. Visit us today at crosscheck.com. That's CROSSCHQ.com.
Kevin, let's jump into chapter 3, talent supply chain thinking. I think you could probably write a whole book on this topic alone. I love it. Fascinating chapter title. Right now, I would say we hire the best candidate who's available and interested at this moment in time. And I think when I think of supply chain, going back to my college days, just-in-time inventory may be one of the holy grails of recruiting. You find the best talent across the entire market and you hire them when you need them. And are there any companies that are leveraging big data to understand Jake is now finishing his project and we have this need 3 weeks out, but if we make an offer to him today, it's going to line up just in time. And so our hiring plan is now aligned more to this just-in-time inventory system. Are there any companies leveraging this amount of data to make better hiring decisions?
There are a few. There are the companies that have somebody in charge of talent intelligence. Amazon is one that's been doing that. Not for every position, not across the board, but for certain key jobs. So it's really building that knowledge base of who's out there that has the skills that we need, who's out there that has the skills we might need. So it's really anticipating the future, which is a big part of it. It's not recruiting has been very reactionary, as we know. You don't really look for anybody until you got the rec, right? And then you go, oh shit, I should have thought about that before, and I didn't, right? So I think the whole thing is, how do you anticipate needs? How do you look out and say, gee, AI is a big deal. We're probably going to be getting into AI. If one of the hiring managers comes and asks me to find somebody with an AI background, do I have anybody that I can, I don't know anybody. So I better start developing that database. I'd start getting that talent intelligence to do that. So it's really pretty much what a good supply chain manager does at a company like Apple. They know that we're probably going to be working on these really cool projects. So who can do incredibly amazing machining, right? Or who can do other things that we might need in order to execute our product. So the anticipating in the manufacturing world, in the logistics world, I mean, UPS, they've got tons of data about who's going to ship packages, how many are going to be shipped, how many are going to be shipped from, Podunk, some Podunk city versus New York City, right? They have this data. They know and they can predict what they're going to need. And they are another one that does workforce planning really, really well. UPS rarely has any problem finding drivers, okay? They're really proactive about that. They've got great databases of people. So, and understanding the market, understanding where your company is going, anticipating skill needs, and pre-sourcing, if you want to call it that, developing your talent community so that you have a just-in-time capability. So, I mean, many of you may have heard of Lou Adler. He's been around forever in our space, good friend of mine. He's got a statistic that I've always loved. He said that if you're the best recruiter in the world, when a hiring manager says, I need somebody, he says, here you go. 0. Okay. That would be the world's greatest recruiter. And he said, what would that require? That would require that you anticipate that manager's needs. You know that manager personality. You've got somebody already pre-selected for that role, maybe 2 or 3 people already pre-selected, but you've got one that that hiring manager is going to love, and you know that they are qualified and ready right now, and you can present that person to the hiring manager. Now that's a bit of a utopian situation. I don't expect, but the closer you get to that goal, the better you are as a recruiter, and that's what the talent supply chain is all about.
Absolutely, it's a strong business partnership there. One of the other interesting things, as we talked about this return to the office, a lot of companies had to do the planning if they had an office environment. You had to make sure you had the space for Kevin to show up next week. Now, it's interesting that the conversation has shifted to, do we have enough laptops? Can we get them to that country? Can we add the Zoom licensing requirements? It's so much quicker where you don't have to think about physical office space. Another thing with the virtual world and hiring places that we're finding ourselves. So this entire chapter is fascinating, and thank you for writing it.
Just give me flashbacks to relocation bonuses and the whole concept of having to discuss with them, when they can move out here with their family, and that is mostly a thing of the past.
Yeah, thing of the past.
Jake, let's jump over chapter 4, talent attraction.
Yeah, so why don't you just speak to us about that? That's never been something that's been in my space as a recruiter or a product person. The real top of funnel, recruitment marketing, just running that engine. Help us understand the landscape today and where you think that's going.
I think most companies do a really bad job at it. All right, they, most people have never heard of the companies, have no idea what they do. They got a call from a recruiter. You want to work at this company? Tell me a little bit about your company, right? So, we need to attract talent, not go out and try to pull it in. And you attract it just like you do with marketing. Why would somebody go to buy a BMW or any other car or any product? It's because of marketing. Okay, you're aware of the product. It's created it's got some sort of a mental picture in your brain of what that product is all about and what it's going to do for you. And then in the old days, we had that with a handful of companies. Everybody wanted to work for GE or IBM or whatever, right? That's sort of gone, except, maybe Google, a couple have that aura, but most of them don't. So you need to have somebody who can actually create the brand, a targeted brand. Most branding is just across the board. Anybody, they just throw it out there for the whole world. Mercedes doesn't advertise on television, if you've ever noticed. They don't advertise in mass media. They advertise through very targeted high-end publications or through targeted emails to a demographic that earns the right amount of money to afford a Mercedes. So we need to do the same thing in talent acquisition. We need to target the audience that we need to attract. We need to know where they go, what they read, what they like, what they're interested in, and then target our marketing to that particular segment. We need more sophisticated messaging. We need just so much in that space. I think it's one of the future roles of recruiters, that the ones that survive are going to be good marketeers and good recruiting people, good people that can create that brand and that image. That is so critical. And even if you're a little small company, if you've never, I had lunch today with a guy that works for a 25-person startup that's doing some really, really, really cool stuff in AI, and they have zero brand, right? They have zero marketing, and they don't think it's even important, So, to me, you need to get a marketing guy, or woman, or whoever in there that can really develop a message for you, create an image for you, and promote your company. So that's really what that chapter is all about. And their referrals are important, other things are important, but attracting the right people, not everybody, only the people that you want is what's critical.
Right. And one of the things I've been at a company before where we were early to adopt the recruitment marketer, and I think my take, and I'm curious of yours on this, is that it's like a lot of things marketing. Like, how do you measure the success? And in my experience of going to events and things like that and trying to justify budget, leadership wants transactional kind of metrics. Like, okay, how many hires did we get out of this? Well, that's not the case, but that's a nebulous thing to go justify. So how would you say to someone who's maybe in that shoe or in that boat that wants to go invest in the talent attraction, but the stakeholders at the business don't see the value and can't justify the spend?
Now, I think that's true for many different things, but I think with the digital technology we have today, with things like Google Analytics and so forth, we can actually give them the data that they maybe couldn't get a few years ago. So I can say how many of the right qualified people have actually gone to our website and actually applied. Okay, that's a pretty good measure of your marketing working. Okay, how many people have we interviewed that are qualified for this job? Or maybe the contrary measure, how many non-qualified people have come to our website and we had to disposition them, which is a negative kind of a thing, but something you need to work on, right? So, we've got all kinds of metrics now that we can use on the career site, on just general app who applied, how many active candidates did we receive that were excited and qualified and couldn't wait to work for us, versus how many just sort of sent 100 applications in for us that were totally unqualified, which means that we're not doing a good job at targeting our marketing. So, I mean, there's a lot of good statistics you can come up with in that area. I don't think it's hard anymore. It was very hard back in the days before we had the internet and the technology we have today. But even in those days, even without that, you could say, how many non-qualified people are we getting? If we're getting tons of non-qualified people, your marketing is not working, right? You're not targeting the right audience. You're attracting people that we don't want. So what can you do to target the people we do want? Which is really, to me, that's the key thing. Mercedes doesn't want 500 people coming to their showroom that can't afford to buy a Mercedes, all right? It wastes the salesman's time. It wastes everybody's time. It's completely useless, right? But we're doing that in recruiting all the time. We have 500 people we will never hire coming to our door because the door is wide open, and we just say, come on in. And that's really what we need to stop doing.
Yeah, I'll go test drive a Mercedes, though, Kevin, if they let me.
When I was in college, I went over to the Rolls-Royce. I went to Boston University, and right across the street was the Rolls-Royce dealership. And I remember walking in there and asking them if I could take a test drive.
How'd that end up?
Not well at all.
You've yet to drive a Rolls Royce, is what I'm hearing.
I've never driven one yet. No, I haven't.
Kevin, let's move into Chapter 5, selection. I'm going to focus on a small section of this because there's a lot in this chapter around assessments, the gamification of assessments, all of this stuff. One thing that stands out to me, and I was telling this example to Jake, but maybe I'll just do a hypothetical. What do you call the person who manages the systems or the launch of a product?
Good question. A project
manager, product manager, right? What do you call the person who oversees and manages and helps facilitate the hiring process? A recruiter, not a hiring manager. The language is so interesting to me, right? And in your book, you specifically call out the hiring managers in the driver's seat on candidate selection mostly. Why is this so commonplace?
Because they're the ones that are going to be held ultimately accountable for getting the work done. And that work is done through that person, not the recruiter. The recruiter is never going to be held accountable for what that person did, right? A hiring manager will be. So if they hire somebody who's completely incapable of doing the job at the level that they need it done at, they're the ones that are going to suffer, right? So that's why they need to own that selection process.
And it's interesting. I mean, even taking that product manager to hiring manager, some hiring managers maybe hire 2 to 3 people a year, but we expect them to not only be experts in their day-to-day job, experts in the management, expert in the business. We also expect them to be interviewing experts. And again, we put them in the driver's seat. So I don't know, interesting topic. We could probably riff on this for about 30 minutes, but it's an interesting dynamic in our selection process and how we've set it up.
And I think there's no reason the hiring manager can't be helped by AI. Once again, the AI can actually generate good questions for him to ask that candidate. It can give him some good advice about, what skills or what level of skill would be the most appropriate for this job, right? I think AI can do that probably better than most recruiters can if it's got the data that it's built from past hires from other people in the company or data from other companies, right? So, I mean, I think that the recruiter can be a guide. The recruiter can be the shepherd, if you want to call it that, the influencer. But I think, again, the role of technology in helping the hiring manager is vastly underappreciated and not even on the radar at this point, right? But, I think the hiring manager could get tons of advice and help from the technology. I envision the day when actually the first place the recruiter goes is to the computer and just says, I need this. And the computer can actually interrogate and say, why do you need that? And tell me more. And really, really doing things that a recruiter would like to do, but usually is afraid to do, or doesn't have enough credibility to do, or enough influence to do. So I think the technology could be a game changer in that whole selection space, quite honestly.
And do you think the hiring manager should retain the hiring decision, or do you think that should be by committee?
Well, I think the hiring manager has to own the whole thing, the selection, the decision. It's like he can get advice from 1 million people, but the buck stops here. And I think that's really what you have to understand, that if they don't have accountability for their hire, they shouldn't be hiring people.
Okay, chapter 6, RPO or in-house. You got a good visual in there. If the C-suite is willing to invest in TA and views it as a strategic advantage, build the capability and embed solutions for peak demand. If it views TA as a cost center, go the RPO route. So obviously there's many different options between fully in-house, fully RPO. What is the optimal ratio in today's market if you want to bring in the macro environment, the short-term trends, and then where do you see this ratio shifting in the future?
I think there's a huge future for RPO. I think if you've looked at the data, it's been growing incredibly fast for the last decade. It's somewhere around a 15% annual growth rate of RPO, which is amazing. RPOs are getting more sophisticated and better every day. I'll give you my perspective on RPOs. The good RPOs, and there are increasing number of good ones, have taken some of their profit because they are for profit and have invested it in technology. They've invested it in building systems that actually augment and improve what they do. Where many corporate recruiters, most corporate recruiters, have a really hard time getting the budget for that kind of thing and don't have the expertise, as we talked about before, to integrate and use this technology effectively, right? So the RPOs hire the technology guy. They have 2 or 3 technology experts that are helping them either build or buy and integrate the right technology. So they also have the option of hiring the best recruiters and, firing them if they're not performing well. Corporations have much more difficult time doing that. Once you get somebody hired, it's really a challenge to get rid of them. You've got to go through a big hassle of, really proving they're not producing and so forth and so on. So I'm a big fan of RPO when they're good RPOs and it's well done. All right. Historically, RPOs have been done for that low cost, high volume. And I think that's probably still a very legitimate role for them to do. And they can leverage technology hugely to do that and do that probably better and cheaper than you can do that, really. As far as professional hiring goes, they're getting better and better at that as well. Like I said, they're building good technology and they're hiring good recruiters to do that more effectively. So I know a couple of companies that have outsourced everything to an RPO, all recruiting, except for executive and college.
As you're describing this, I'm relatively new to understanding the whole spectrum of what RPOs are actually delivering with clients. I've recruited as an agency before, but not quite the sophistication level of an RPO. And as to our previous discussion about the inevitable path forward to all these various automation platforms or tools or whatever they're going to be, a collection of different point solutions. I mean, who else is teed up better than to own that space as an RPO? And is there a path of where the vast majority of companies don't even have in-house recruiting?
Yeah, I completely agree. Yes, there's several companies have opted to go completely RPO, and they're doing very, very well with that. So, I mean, I think it's a huge move for a company to do. It takes a leader that's got some chutzpah to make that happen. And the recruiters are not fired. The recruiters go to work for the RPO, the recruiters they have. But they're vetted and retrained and or let go based on their performance in the RPO. But the real benefit to the RPO is bringing in that layer of technology that they have, which they've really invested a lot of money in and are really generally very good at. They also have experts. They have experts in assessment. They've got IO psychologists. They've got really good people that can give really solid advice that, again, most recruiting functions don't have those things, right? If a hiring manager says, why should I use this test to screen somebody? Most recruiters have no idea of why, or they can't give them the professional statistical background that an IO psych could give a hiring manager about this thing. So the many, many benefits of RPO. And I think if I was in a medium to small size company, I absolutely would have an RPO. Okay. If I'm in a bigger company, I might at least use for part of my recruiting. I would definitely set it to RPO. And that's the trend. That is increasingly the trend.
Yeah. Especially if teams have to remain more flexible going forward. It's just a no-brainer. They're going to do quite well.
And that's the other thing. As a company, it gives you great flexibility. You can ramp down or ramp up the RPOs. It's really hard and difficult and not much fun to lay off half your, as we've seen. Look at this last year, the number of recruiters that have been laid off just in droves, right? And not much fun and not nice if you really, as a recruiter, if you really like the company you've been in and suddenly you're riffed, it's not fun. So much better to use technology and an RPO, in my opinion.
Agreed. Okay, chapter 7, the radical new model for talent acquisition. So in this chapter, I don't have a screen share component, but I have your book and I've read through it, and there's a really cool visual with all of the different that effectively shows the structure that you see, that you envision to be the future state of a kind of optimized TA team. Without having to go too detailed, can you kind of share what is that vision and how can we think about that?
I think it's got 3 main components, I guess you could say. Number 1 is that make marketing central and core to what you're doing, along with a talent strategy. So you need to have a talent strategy. Where are you going? Where do you want to go? Who are your key skills? What are the key skills we need to hire? And then you need a marketing plan to target for those key skills and for that need that you have. The second thing is using analytics and technology, which I think you really need to start analyzing the people that you've hired, the success rates, the people that have been successful, the people that haven't been successful, understanding that more thoroughly so you can build better selection models with using the technology. And again, as we talked about earlier, you need to have somebody who can integrate that technology, understands the technology, and can help to select the right technology for you. And then the third big component is automation hub, I call it, or somewhere where you can actually use automation as much as you possibly can to do hiring, whether it's volume or routine jobs, using the automation to hire those people. And what you can't effectively do that way, use an RPO. And then, so what's left of recruiting? What's left of recruiting is probably cross-functional teams of people that are made up of a recruiter, a hiring manager, maybe some other selected people in the company that can help you find and screen those hard to find, really hard to hire candidates, maybe the CFOs, the CEOs, the critical roles that are probably not going to be generally given to an RPO or just automated. But a very small number of hires actually would be part of that. And then a real partnership or an integration with learning and development. So you're really building the internal talent in your company. And, that's part of your overall recruiting strategy is if we're only going to recruit if we can't make it, if we don't have it internally and we can't develop it internally. And if companies really focused on that, I think the external recruiting would drop probably by 50 or 60%. There's plenty of good talent in most companies that is dying to be developed, that would love to have a different opportunity, but needs some training and development in order to do that. So, I mean, very simply, it's a model that's based on what I call common sense and the understanding that technology is playing a bigger and bigger role. We need to embrace it and use it where it's effective and use the people where it's not effective. Things like marketing and relationship building, talent intelligence, those things can be augmented and informed by the technology, but we still need a person there to make those decisions and execute on those things. So, I mean, I think I would love to see even one company adopt that model. I was just talking with a company in the Middle East that's really going to try to adopt that model, which is really fascinating to me. And what's most interesting of all to me is a lot of what I'm getting in reactions to the book and so forth, it's coming from Asia and the Middle East, not from Europe and America. We seem very entrenched in yesterday. Yeah, we don't really want to do tomorrow.
True on several fronts, but another episode.
Kevin, chapter 8, the final chapter, what hath God wrought? One thing that stood out to me, and I think this goes in with your marketing at the strategic forefront of this new model, hyper-personalization of employer branding. And we also see this convergence of data privacy and protection where you can't even, I think European laws don't even want us emailing people on their personal emails, which takes out that sourcing component. So how do you see this convergent of hyper-personalization, data privacy, and ultimately what wins out in that world?
Well, I think data privacy will inevitably have to be modified or made more open to letting people be selected and attracted to an organization. It would be like saying, I can't advertise a Mercedes to you unless you give me permission. That's really what we're saying, which is ridiculous when you think about it. I understand where they're coming from. It's a fear of, invasion of your privacy, et cetera, but I think it's vastly overblown and made a big deal, which is why Asia and the Middle East don't have those restrictions and why they're probably going to be maybe more successful at this. But I mean, it's putting things into perspective like I just did with a car. You don't have to ask somebody to advertise for a Mercedes. I can send you an email unsolicited saying, would you like to buy a Mercedes? Why can't I send you an email unsolicited and say, would you like a job? To me, it's just counterproductive to everything. We want high employment. We want people to have good jobs, and yet we do everything to make sure they don't get one. So, I'm obviously not a fan of GDPR and a lot of other things and how they're being used. I think we're in danger of some of that here in the U.S. as well, although a little bit less so. And I think that the hyper-personalization is critical. It's what it's all about. It's targeting your marketing at those people that are most likely to be successful in your company and interested in your company. Right? It's just like any other product or service. You try to target it to the people who really need it and can benefit from it the most. And eliminates a lot of the randomness that we have today, which takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and results in good people being missed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the hyper-personalization will be nice. The recruiters who are recruiting for Java engineers will not receive offers to be Java engineers themselves. So maybe the technology will help people get better outcomes and better targeted messages. So great. Kevin, thank you so much. Is there anything that you didn't put in this book that you wanted to?
I think if I had to do anything more, I'd just talk a lot more about the internal development of people, the training and development. I think we talk about it in the book, but maybe not enough. I think that's increasingly, in my mind, where companies really need to focus. We're talking about lack of engagement, high turnover, people not wanting to work for you. The reasons that all of those things happen is because they don't see any value. One of the things, I think there's a chapter in there why I hate the term people are our most important asset. I don't think people are assets. You can't depreciate me. You can't write me off on your books. Okay. I hate that term beyond comprehension. All right. I think I'm an investor and I choose to invest in the company and I expect a return on my investment. I'm going to give you my skills and my knowledge to help your company be successful. What's my return beyond a paycheck? The paycheck's not enough of a return. The return I get is continuous development, is opportunities to advance, to do new things, to have an engaging and exciting work to do, a purpose. And that's where companies have missed it. I think that's why there's high turnover. People are in dead-end, boring jobs. As they see any opportunity to advance, they don't get any training or development, so they leave. So to me, I think one of the key things would be to really focus on that internal development.
Kevin, you already touched on the tour of duty model from LinkedIn that they made famous as well in here. So can't recommend this book enough. Thank you so much for spending this much time with us.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciated the conversation. It was good. Thanks.